What's hard is who you need to be throughout the process of doing the goal and appreciating the process and not just caring about the end result. So my whole thing is you have to be coachable, meaning you have to be willing to ask questions, evaluate your mistakes. That's a huge thing. People like to just set a goal, and then when they miss it, they're just like, oh, I'll do it better next time. I'll do it better tomorrow. Because they are fearful of beating themselves up when they have to evaluate their quote unquote mistakes or things that went wrong. But that's the only way you improve. So I think you should actually have an evaluation process to achieve your goal when you do mess up, and make room for mistakes. Like, you're going to not be perfect.
I'm your host, Kim Hines, and welcome to the Emotional Eats podcast. I'm on a mission to show you that what you consume, not just the food, affects your entire life. Midlife is different. Let's dig into the real reasons why you eat when you're not hungry and why you're not feeling well. My guest and I are going to give you doable solutions and help you let go of perfectionism, food rules, and stress to make changes that will last a lifetime. If you're ready to ditch old school diet culture and nourish your entire life, this is the show for you. If you've ever felt stuck, struggled to get things done, or doubted yourself, this episode with Hailey Rowe is going to be incredibly empowering. Hailey Rowe is a certified human potential coach, life coach, and marketing and sales consultant. She shares amazing tips about time management, but also that it's not just about strategy, but it's about our beliefs around time. You get to find the habits that steal your time and why you may have paralysis when trying to get things done. She helps us realize that we can flip the questions and, instead of doubting ourselves, create the life we want to live. She also shares some amazing insights around goal setting, procrastination, and why failing is okay. I love how she talks about resiliency and getting out of your comfort zone, and how those two things actually go hand in hand. Make sure to check out her show notes for all of her links, and you can also find a free time management system and a free overwhelm cheat sheet from Hailey in our show notes. Make sure to listen to the end for her powerful tips, and enjoy the episode. Hi, Hailey. Thanks for coming to the podcast.
Hi, thank you so much for having me, Kim.
I'm so excited today because you were actually my coach also, and you have so many valuable tools for women, especially in our midlife, and I want to share you with everyone. So when we do something and we are sharing and helping and coaching, it's usually because of a passion or a purpose that came from our past. I would love to know more about your story and how you came from whatever your beginnings were. And I know it, but I wanted everyone else to know it, to coming to helping women, and kind of what was that evolution?
Absolutely, yes. So I think that fitness was my gateway into personal development. And in high school, I started to exercise and learn about fitness. And that was kind of like my gateway in. And then at that point, I was like, well, I am very interested in becoming better in different ways in my life. And so I ended up getting some certifications with coaching. And I realized, I got some fitness certifications, I got some health certifications, I got a behavioral change specialist and a human potential coach, life coaching certification. And I realized that I wanted to do something with my own business and helping people and making the world a better place, but I wasn't quite sure what I wanted that to look like. And I also, this might be something we talk about today, I had some limiting beliefs, like I don't have enough experience to help others, or I'm too young to help others, or, just stuff like that. And so I ended up getting my bachelor's in entrepreneurship because I knew I wanted to have my own business one day. And then I ended up working in the startup world and business development and marketing. And that was a time where I really had to use my coaching tools to coach myself because it was very stressful. It was very overwhelming. I had to learn a lot of things and just deliver on expectations that I didn't feel quote unquote qualified to do, or like I wasn't enough. And I did that for a while. And then in 2017, one of the companies that I worked for in business development and marketing, they had to let everybody go because it was going to be a wellness company and they had to get these machines approved. And it was this whole thing and it was taking a long time. And that's when I was like, well, you know what? I told myself I wasn't ready to start my own business. But at this point, what I thought was so safe, having my day job, was actually not as safe as I thought. And so I started my own business in coaching. And what I do is I am both a business coach and consultant. So I help people with launching their business. And, if you're a service provider or something along those lines, I help you with your sales and your marketing. But I also do I'm also a certified life coach, and I do a lot of coaching with individuals who just want to advance in their life and overcome limiting beliefs or overcome time limitations and things like that. So that is how I got to where I am today.
That's really powerful. You started really young. You knew some of the things that you already wanted to do, but you have built on it so much and have so much valuable information. And you mentioned the limiting beliefs and even your own, self-doubt and fears. What are some of the limiting beliefs that you think women, as they're getting to 40 and after, what are some of those things that are holding them back, making them feel stuck because of their beliefs?
Yeah. So I think that what usually happens is we have a goal or we have something we want to do or we have, something that we want to improve. And then there's a second half to that where we say, or I'm just the kind of person who blank. And whatever you would fill in after that part, but I'm too old, but people don't want to hear from me, but I don't know where to start, but whatever, I'm not smart enough, pretty enough, whatever. And I think the thing that keeps us stuck is just dismissing that as fact and letting it get in the way instead of exploring it and seeing, what do I want to believe about myself? What's the life I want to create? And how can I start to do that? And using what we call solution-oriented questions. So instead of, for anybody listening here, if you have a statement like, I'm not enough or whatever, rather than saying like, why am I not enough? Like, why can't I do this? Why can't I figure this out? Flip the question to something like, what if I could figure this out? Or what are some reasons why I could, I am more than enough, and you really have to start to shift the questions you're asking yourself. And I think that's the first step to starting to take action instead of letting your beliefs hold you back.
I think that's great. What could you do? What are the reasons this could work out? That's really powerful because we've always talked about positive and negative self-talk, and limiting beliefs really keep us in that negative. And the limiting beliefs also tend to, when I am coaching women or I am chatting with women who are in the same space I am, even as a coach, sometimes those limiting beliefs hold us back, even physically, from getting things done that we need to do. So, and I know we're juggling responsibilities and commitments, but here's a great example: getting everything done and having a good time management strategy. We don't even think of it as a time management strategy. We're just not thinking there's enough time in the day. So what do you say to someone like that who's like, I just don't have enough time to do the things I want to do?
Yeah. Wow. So time is neutral, meaning we all have the same 24 hours in a day, but we all have beliefs about time. Like, there's not enough of it. If I am going to use my time, it should be for my family, not for myself. So I would suggest the first step, there's two parts to time management. There's the actual strategy, as you said, and then there's your beliefs about it. But first we have to clean up your beliefs about it. So write down your thoughts about time. And they might even be hard to detect because you just think they're so true. Like, I just don't have enough time. And you just think that is the real truth of it, but that is an opinion. So write those down, star the one that is what we like the most painful for you, or what you feel like is the biggest obstacle. And then what we want to do one by one is one of two things. Either, if it's a mindset thing, have a reframe for it and have something where we're starting to go in the right direction. So I'm not asking you to look at your, thought of, I don't have enough time, and start thinking I have more than enough time to do everything I want to do, because you did not believe that. But what you could think is, I do have little pockets of time, or there are times when I could start layering in this habit on top of what I'm already doing or whatever. But it can be what we call like a little bridge in the right direction to start forming a new belief. And then what do you know? You start gathering more evidence for that. You start seeing it's possible. And then suddenly you just are using your time differently and have more time. But if it's more of a strategic thing, like if you're just looking at your day and you're like, I block meetings from 9 to 6, and then my kids come home and then I have to feed them dinner and then it's bedtime and whatever. Well, then it's more of a strategic thing where we need to look at, okay, what are you willing to say no to? What are you willing to, set boundaries around, or, change your call block time to 9 to 12 and then have 1 hour break or whatever to work in your new thing that you want to do. And so that becomes easier because it's something that's just more of a math problem and more logical solving. And I actually have a time management system guide that I think we're going to put in the show notes. It's haileyrowe.com/time planning, but it takes you through doing a little bit of a time audit on yourself, because that's the first step. You have to know, where is your time going and energy going? The second step is to see, are there any things you can remove and or streamline or simplify or delegate, things like that. And then the third step is to determine prioritize, break down your things you have to do by, there's major consequences if I don't get this done, or this is a goal-aligned activity I want to start working in, compared to more longer term things that aren't as important. So I have my clients have both like a top priority this week, their daily basics, which are things they have to do maybe for the home life or the kids or whatever on a regular basis. The later list, meaning there's not major consequences if you don't get to this week. And then what we call the someday list, which is like, you had a really good idea or you want to watch a really great movie or something, but it's not like anything's going to happen if you don't. So breaking that down, and then being realistic with your time planning for the day. So when you look at your priority list, breaking down those tasks into things that you can confidently say, I think this will take me 30 minutes or less. That's how you know you've broken it down enough. If it's on there and if you have something on your list, like I need to, go through my finances. Well, that's there's like several tasks in that. There's probably several things you'll have to log into. There's probably, a spreadsheet involved, et cetera. So breaking it down to like, today, I'm just going to open the spreadsheet and log one account and what's going on in there or something like that. So those are a couple tips. I can definitely go deeper on that if you'd like, but that's just some things that I notice have to happen.
That is so great because 1, changing the belief is really important, but 2, actually breaking it down. And one of the things that I love is really looking at what are those things that you can just start and do 10 minutes, because we think that we need 3 hours to complete a project. And so we never start it, because who has 3 hours most of the time? But I have also noticed when you are talking about breaking everything down, there's so many distractions, and we have, a lot of time management wasters, and I call them time sucks. What are some of those things that are pulling us away that maybe we want to take a look at cutting down, limiting, or putting a time frame around?
Yeah, totally. So I'm definitely going to cover that. But one thing I want to add to what you just said about breaking things down is, when you're planning your day, I think as women, we constantly set ourselves up sometimes to let ourselves down, because we overbook ourselves and plan, and then we never honor the commitments to ourselves. And then that creates kind of this disconnect in our confidence, because we're like, I just can't, I'm not reliable. Like, I don't trust myself. And so I really suggest making like a wish list of everything you'd love to do today, but then actually blocking out your meetings, appointments, things you need to do with your kids, et cetera. And then seeing what's left and putting the top priority broken down things in there, and starting to learn how to time batch and honor any small realistic commitment to yourself first, and not thinking that is not enough to count. So what you just said is like, sometimes we think 10 minutes, doing something for 10 minutes, just why bother if we don't have the whole 3 hours? But the truth is that is how it has to start, because you have to start honoring a commitment to yourself, and that gains confidence. And then the other thing about going through that process regularly is you start to get a really good grasp on how long things take you. And a lot of times people feel pressure like, well, I don't want to restrict myself to having to, finish this email in an hour, or I don't want to have to time block my day because I want to be spontaneous. But the truth is, I think discipline is freedom, and actually having that, ability to decide how long something's going to take you and then do it within that time. It's very freeing and very empowering. So going back to your question about what distracts us, a couple things. One, I think, honestly, a lot of it is the mental draining we do. So overthinking your task, reading, obsessing about whatever, if you're a business owner, and this is a side note, like what you're going to post, or making a video of yourself and recording it 70 times before you post it, or whatever. Or if you are, in your workplace, maybe overthinking things, that can definitely drain us and take up a lot of time and add mental drama to just neutral, like, here's my activities for the day. The second thing I think is comparison and social media. It's very easy to, and these things are wired to make us want to keep using them. So catching yourself with when you feel uncomfortable emotions and or are procrastinating and or want to avoid a task, ask yourself why. And usually we all have habits that I call like, they steal from us. They steal our joy. They steal from us. And so some people like to numb, like they like to watch Netflix. They like to overeat. They like to overdrink to just numb out. Some people like to overbusy themselves. Like, well, I'm just going to be doing all this stuff. I'm just going to clean the kitchen, and then I'm going to clean my desk. And I'm not actually going to do the things that I know are really important right now, because I just need to clean first. I need a clean space, and I need to overbusy myself. So some of us overdo. And then the rest of us tend to maybe repress or pretend that, we tend to maybe avoid or be in paralysis and just not really do anything. So I think I would ask your listeners to identify, what kind of distractor are you? Like, which of those things do you fall into that takes you away from what you need to be doing? And then once you know that, then you can start to build pattern interrupts around those habits, or start to monitor a level up that you can do this week, or things like that.
Those are really powerful, because I think, well, let's talk about social media for a second. The comparisonitis, it's not just the scrolling, because we know, like you said, they're designed to keep us searching. Our brain needs to keep searching, and we've gotten that dopamine hit from it, but it's also comparing. And I think the big thing that a lot of women see is, if I can't do it as well as what I see, then it's going to be hard for me to start. But also, you touched upon that perfectionism, doing that video over 75 times. That's really good to know. And sometimes I think it is hard for women to say good enough and move forward. So that is an amazing point. I also wanted to talk about the 10 minutes getting in. You mentioned something, and I want to connect this to the fear of, trying to get things done. When we don't jump in, do you think that with that analysis paralysis, that when we don't even take the 10 minutes to look and explore what we're supposed to be working on, do you think there's a fear underneath that procrastination?
Yeah, definitely. I think that with anything in your life that you're not doing that you want to be doing, it's usually because either you fear the upside of it actually working. So sometimes we actually fear, what if I start doing this for 10 minutes a day and I become successful at it, and then I have this new responsibility, or whatever, like fear of success almost. And then other times it's to stay comfortable and just, do what we're used to and avoid change. So I do think procrastination is usually trying to tell you something. And also, there's one positive. It could be that you're procrastinating because it's not a priority, and you are trying to fight against that. You don't like you're lying to yourself about your priorities. So that's a really important point, is that if there's, if you are saying, but my kids just take up so much of my time, and so I never get to this stuff, and you're kind of fighting against that. But the truth is you really, you want to prioritize your children. Like, why not honor that and be like, no, they always come first. And I'm okay with if I don't get to XYZ task, and just kind of admitting that to yourself, because sometimes I think we like fight against it and resist, and that just wears us out more. And then we definitely don't start doing the thing we're trying to do.
That's great. I appreciate you sharing that, because I think when we start to understand what's underneath it, then we can do something about that. We can journal on it or think about why we're not going forward. And it's funny that you said the fear of success, because everyone associates fear with fear of failure, but fear of success does bring, and when you're over 40, do you want to bring on even more responsibility? Do you want to bring attention to yourself? Do you want to invite more into your life? So that's very powerful. And a lot of women at this age are kind of reinventing themselves for many reasons. Their kids have, grown up and moved out. And some people have, maybe their relationships have changed. They're getting remarried, or they have more time on their hands. Do you find that the women that you're working with, what are the types of things at this point in their age range, midlife, are they reinventing themselves? Are they doing new things? What are some of the things that they want to do?
Yeah, definitely. I think a lot of times they are at a point in their life where they want to lean into what's most important to them, and not just do things because they want to look cool, or, they think they should. I think it becomes more clear, like, this sounds really bad, but we all realize, like, we don't have a ton of time, like we have a couple decades, yeah. Right? So I think it's something more like you realize what's really important to you, and you want to double down on that. And I also think it can be seen as a new, fresh start or opportunity when you're going through those life transitions, like your kids are out, or things like that. So I think what I see women doing is that they want to either do something that they put on the back burner because they were momming, and they want to do something for themselves. So sometimes that looks like a new hobby, or pursuing a new career, or starting a business. And then I also see like habits start to come into play. Like they really want to be healthy, and they want to improve their health span as they age. And so they want to start those habits, which is why they come to you, Kim. So those are kind of the two big ones that I see.
I feel like I'm in that stage, because just sharing with everybody again, Hailey was my coach, and I started my business at 50. And you're absolutely right. You start finding what's important. What do you want to contribute to the world? What's your purpose? Obviously family and everything is important too, but it is a wonderful time for women in midlife, because you have a lot of wisdom to bring, but we don't always believe that. And we don't always feel like we bounce back as easily. And I'm curious, what are some things you share with women who are really trying to build some resilience? Maybe they've come out of some pretty strong life transitions and events that may not have been super positive, or they've come out of business experiences, or they're changing jobs. How do you help them build some resilience?
Yeah, that's a great question. So one of the things that I really believe in is cognitive behavioral psychology, and that kind of thing. And so I think it's important to, one of the things I choose to believe is that everything that happens to me, even in the moment, if it feels hard, I like to find the reason why it was the best possible thing that could have happened. And one thing you can think about is your life experiences, they are just facts, right? So I think the first step is to separate what you're believing about your life versus the actual just situational facts, and knowing that you get to put the thought associated with that fact. So in other words, two people can have the exact same life experience. They could both have had bad, like parents who said very strong statements to them that weren't most people would perceive as not good, et cetera. And one person could believe like, wow, like I never want to create that for my family. And I'm going to go forth and make sure that I, managing my mind and whatever. And the other person could say, I grew up with a bad family. This is just my destiny. Start hurting other people because that's what they experienced. And so it all comes down to your thoughts and beliefs about situations. So the first step is to just know that you get to decide. It's not happening to you. You could decide it's happening for you and decide what you want to start believing about it. And the other thing is, to build resilience, you have to put yourself sometimes in uncomfortable situations and harm's way. And remember that either way, whether you take an action, whether you stay paralyzed and, be harmed by your life experiences, or you take action and put yourself out there, even though it's uncomfortable, the second option has way more upside potential. And either way, you're going to feel uncomfortable. So just acknowledging like, either way, I'm going to feel feelings that are probably not very pleasant, but which one has more upside and which one do I want to, will make me more resilient? And putting yourself out in the ring. Once, like, I'll give you an example. In sales, originally it really stings when you get a rejection. But over time, when you've had 100 people reject you and you realize it's not just about you, it's usually something going on for them, or it's not the right fit or whatever, you bounce back so quickly, it's not, going to derail your day. So I think having a reset ritual for yourself in the beginning when it is tough is important, but at the same time, putting yourself in those uncomfortable situations over and over again and reminding yourself that mistakes and failures, they are not bad. There's nothing wrong with them. They're supposed to be happening. I think that's where it becomes, you become more resilient.
I appreciate so much that you bring in the thought process, because we feel so out of control when things happen, to us / for us. And you're changing someone's mindset and helping them see the whole picture and to see and it doesn't even have to be necessarily the upside. It can just be the part that you can control. And
Yeah.
I think that's a really powerful strategy. And I hope our listeners really soaked that in, because we're always going to be dealing with something, and how we look at it and how we feel about it is really important, because that's what's going to help clear our head and our hearts to be able to make better decisions around whatever's happening also. So
Definitely.
I appreciate that. So women who are coming to you, we were talking about this, a lot of women and that are listening to this podcast are over 40, and this is helpful for everyone. So I'm excited to share this with anyone who'll listen, because it's so powerful. But do you have women coming to you that are having issues with thinking about the aging process and starting things or doing things, or feeling like, I'm not necessarily saying giving up, but thinking that they're too old to do certain things? Have you found that?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, and it's like, there's always going to be, in any stage of life, there's always going to be a reason why you think you're not enough to do something and all that. So it's just a different flavor when you're, for most of the ladies over, 50, it becomes, oh, well, it's too late, or I'm too old, or aging fears.
Yes. And that's so true. You just said it. It's just a different flavor of not feeling enough. And it goes back to those limiting beliefs and exploring, where did that belief first come from? Because we will replay that story over and over and over again. And I think the reason why I bring the aging part up is we have throughout the podcast also talked about how it's our choice. Like you just said, we can choose how to feel about this, even if we see on social media or in society what we might feel is too old to do something. That, by the way, is changing. If you look all over the internet, there are very powerful women, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, just really making a difference. And I appreciate you changing that narrative and helping with that cause to help change the mindset. And it doesn't have to be on aging. It could be on anything. So I really appreciate that. I would love to know too about self-care, because when we talk about time management, prioritizing things in our lives, we know that we say this, we throw this word hyphenated word self-care around a lot. But what do you think the importance of taking care of ourselves is, and how can we bring that in as a priority? And how does that affect what we're doing if we're not doing it?
Yeah. So I think with self-care, you have to stop seeing it as what you think you should be doing and or what health gurus are telling you to do. I think you need to define what self-care means for you, and it's going to look different every day. So I actually love having the journal prompt of like, what does self-care look like for me today? And some days it's going to be, I want to call a friend. Other days it's going to be, I need to be disciplined today because that's going to really help me get this book done or whatever I'm doing. And that is really what I want to be focused on right now. So I think self-care is not just like bubble baths and all the things that you hear is like going to the spa, whatever. Sometimes self-care is being stern with yourself and being like, girl, we need to get this book done today. Right. And I think the other thing with self-care is identifying your unique principles and working with your own strengths instead of against them. So in other words, I use this example on a podcast I was on recently. Like for so long, I just was shooting on myself. Like I need to do what health gurus say, where I eat small meals throughout the day. And, I go to bed at 10:30 and I need to do it this way. And I was like, every time I didn't measure up to that, I was like beating myself up versus when I actually am like, no, I'm the kind of person, I kind of like bigger meals and that works for me and less frequent. And, as long as I get 8 hours of sleep, like I'm going to have this bedtime window and all that. And just like working with my strengths and my personality type and like what I want to do at this time. And my priorities. And that really changed things for me because then I wasn't beating myself up. I had a lot less stress, et cetera. So less quote unquote healthy from the standpoint of like, what does everybody say you should do, but more healthy because I'm honoring myself and my own strengths and tendencies and things like that. And I have a little bit of like, I think defining what are your principles? Like, I don't like to eat if I'm not hungry. That's something that is like innate. Like I'm not going to eat breakfast right when I wake up if I'm not feeling it right now, that's just one of my principles, but what could be your principles, right? And just defining those, because then you can actually have something you can work with.
Yes. So listeners, stop shoulding yourself. And I also think that we forget about bioindividuality. We really think about the masses and what we're seeing and that we should do something. And that unfortunately, that's where the shame and guilt comes from instead of following what works for us. But our health suffers for that. Our health suffers. It's not just getting things done. We are not doing the things that we want to do if we're trying to fit into some box. And I appreciate too that when you talk about self-care, not just being bubble baths and massages and things that we typically think, getting your nails done. And the funny thing is, I don't love taking time to do that stuff. So when people think that's such an indulgence, like I don't feel like taking the time for that. But if you put me on a beach and let me walk on a beach, or self-care to me is sitting and reading a mystery novel. So I love that you said that, because then we can take what we feel fills our soul and nourishes us and do that instead of doing something that's not really, very fulfilling. I appreciate that. So I also want to ask about boundaries and people pleasing. How is this affecting women, and how is this affecting them getting things done and how they feel about themselves?
Yeah. So anytime we all have this, and I have it too, where we have these like rule books for how we think other people around us should act and what they should do and not do. And then we have our own rule book for ourselves, and our expectations are usually very high. And then usually we expect those same expectations from other people a lot of the time. So anytime you have a rule book, you're going to be setting yourself up for disappointment, because people are going to be their own person all the time. And you just have to accept that. Now, what you can do is what you said, set a boundary. So I am not trying to change the fact that so-and-so is late all the time. But what I am going to do is I'm going to say, I will wait 10 minutes. And if you aren't there, I'm going to leave. And then it's like, okay, now you're back into power. So look at your life and look at maybe things that you're saying about others, like, oh man, they just are never blank, or my husband never compliments me, or whatever. And then ask yourself, well, first of all, usually when you're seeking something from somebody else, it's because you're maybe not giving it to yourself. So in the compliment example, or you're seeking validation or something, it's usually because if you need that from somebody else, maybe you need to start honoring yourself and changing your own opinion about yourself. So that's one part of it. But the other part of it is set boundaries, and remember that boundaries are always what you will do when XYZ person does ABC. It's not what you need them to do. It's not a rule for them. It has to be in your control.
That is fabulous, because the rule book can bring disappointment. And it's interesting because it's not just with boundaries and people, it's with our entire life. Having that rule book and expecting other people to be exactly what you would be. We're all different people. Mm-hmm. But I really love how you're empowering women to, you make the boundary. You make the boundary. And it's interesting because when we are afraid to set boundaries for people, we are afraid of what they're going to think. But the reason why someone might be disappointed in you setting a boundary is because they're not getting what they want anymore from that.
Yeah.
So we have to know that this is for us. And if anybody, side note, if anybody wants to really work on boundaries, Brene Brown has so many great books on boundaries and setting them. And we can be kind and direct and still set our boundaries. Because I think what I hear from women is it brings resentment and the resentment is only hurting ourselves. Women are feeling resentment when somebody crosses boundaries or pushes them too far, when women are feeling like if they don't stand up for themselves a little bit and create that boundary. But again, it doesn't have to be ugly. It can be.
And one thing I want to add to that is with people pleasing, like when you are upset with somebody for not doing something so that you can feel better, and you're saying they're selfish because they're not doing the thing that, I want them to do, it's both sides, right? Like they're not doing the thing that you want them to do for you to feel better. And then you're not doing it because they want to do their own thing for their own selfish reasons. So I think it's just important to remember, like, people pleasing, if you do something that you really genuinely didn't want to do, and you're letting that build up, and you're doing it because you think they'll give something back in return, or because you'll get positive praise outside of you, that's going to make you feel good, you're actually kind of lying. Like you're kind of doing something not because you really want to do it. And so I think it's important to just remind yourself, like, if I'm going to do it, I want to do it because I want to take care of my kids, or I want to, XYZ, and not just do it because you're letting something build up as you want to, it's a give and take or things like that.
That is so true. And I think that when we people please, not just out of kindness or the goodness of our heart, it's probably because there was something in our past where we had to keep the peace, or we had to get attention in a certain way. There's a lot of ways that we can look back and explore. And it goes back a lot to those limiting beliefs too. So those are such great points. So if women at this stage in their life, they're trying to set some goals, maybe they want to do some things that are a little bit bigger than just managing their life better, and that's even a goal right there. What are some ways that you would encourage people to break things down to set the goals? And I love how you broke the day down, but let's look at something a little bit bigger, like starting a business.
Yeah. So I would think for the first part is you want to make sure that your goal is, there's two ways you can look at this. Just determine what kind of goal setter you are. So there's something that I like to call like your big goal, where you set it knowing that it's pretty ambitious and it's probably not going to happen, but you set it so that you think differently and so that you come closer to it than if you wouldn't have had the goal. So I do that because I don't mind if I don't reach the goal. I'm not going to beat myself up over it, but I like having it because then it changes my brain. Like, oh my gosh, if I had to do it that big, a lot of things would change. And here's the things that I see, and here's where I could start. The other way to set a goal, though, is a SMART goal, which is what you all hear about, like specific, measurable, has a date assigned to it, realistic, et cetera. So decide because a SMART goal is good for somebody who they want to achieve the goal, and they it needs to be like their first little baby step, right? So decide what kind of goal setter you are. And once you do, with the SMART goal, you do a brain dump of like, okay, what could get in the way of doing this goal? What do I think I need to do to achieve this goal? What do I need to research or learn, skills that I might need to have to achieve this goal? And then start planning and time blocking into your calendar and all of that. But for the big goal type of person, you have to I like to write down, like, what are all the things I might like have to attempt or fail at and lose at to get to this goal. Because then again, it gets me ready for the discomfort of it, ready for the fails, expecting failure, because the more you fail, the more you also win. So that's just the way I approach it. But the other thing with goal setting is it's less about the actual steps, because we all could break down. It's just, I'm going to use the example of maybe like going to bed earlier. We could all break down like, okay, well, shut down my laptop at 9 p.m. And like the steps are not hard. Like you could figure that out. What's hard is who you need to be throughout the process of doing the goal, and appreciating the process and not just caring about the end result. So my whole thing is you have to be coachable, meaning you have to be willing to ask questions, evaluate your mistakes. That's a huge thing. People like to just set a goal, and then when they miss it, they're just like, oh, I'll do it better next time. I'll do it better tomorrow. Because they are fearful of beating themselves up when they have to evaluate their quote unquote mistakes or things that went wrong. But that's the only way you improve. So I think you should actually have an evaluation process to achieve your goal when you do mess up, and make room for mistakes. Like you're going to not be perfect on the way to this goal. So make room for that evaluation time. So being coachable, that's the one thing. Willingness. So here's the other thing. With SMART goals, you set a timeline for the goal, but I like the idea of being willing to take action and refine your actions until you hit the goal, no matter what timeline. Because then you're going to have a 100% success rate with your goals. Because as long as you're willing to keep refining until it works, that's, to me, is what keeps me in the process. And then the last thing is being solutions oriented, as we talked about earlier in this podcast. So changing your limiting questions to more open-ended, solution-oriented questions to reach your goal. Those are the 3 traits you need to have to achieve your goals. Much more important than the actual steps of, you can do the steps.
Yes, traits over the actual steps. And that's important, because we really do need to create the identity as we're going through it. And even with health coaching, we are creating the person. You are a healthy person. You are that identity. When you live that identity, you're more likely, when you have those traits, to move forward. And I love how you said caring about the process, because our outcome is very important. We know that, but the process of reevaluating, and then you have that 100% outcome. It's going to be a success if you just keep going. In your brain, it's already a success. You're just going to keep working on it. I love that. Yeah. So Hailey, I ask every guest on the show, I really believe in nourishing our entire life. And you've really helped us with a lot of the mindset today, not just food, exercise, but everything, our relationships, connection. If someone's just jumping off today and you had 3 tips that you could share with them, it could be things you've already mentioned or anything else, just to kind of get started on something in this midlife. What are 3 tips that you could share?
Oh, yeah. Okay. So tip number 1 would be make a decision and line up with it. Because if you're saying, I don't know where to start, and you're saying the words, I don't know, what if you did know? Just make one decision and start. That's one thing I would say to get out of overthinking. I think the second thing I would say is learn to love and evaluate your mistakes and fails instead of avoid and deflect, like, oh, I'll just do better next time. And then the third thing is understand that the worst case scenario with pretty much anything you want to pursue that you're scared of is a feeling. And you are already feeling feelings every day in your life. You're capable of going through feelings and just getting more familiar with dealing with feelings and not letting them stop you from doing things is going to be key if you want to live a big life.
That is great. And you are such a gift to all of us. These are amazing tips. Where can everyone find you?
Yeah. Well, thank you again, Kim. And Kim is a great coach for anybody thinking about working with a coach. I've seen the back ends of her business and how much she cares. But I am at Hailey _Rowe, HAILEY_ROWE. And I also have a free time management system and overwhelm cheat sheet for your audience. So the overwhelm cheat sheet, you can put that link in your show notes. The time planning one, I know off the top of my head, it's haileyrowe.com/time planning. And then I am, we'll put the website in the show notes and things like that. So if you guys want to reach out and just share what you're taking action on from the podcast, would love to hear. And those are the places you can find me. And then I do have a free Facebook group called the Marketing Hub for business owners. So that's facebook.com/group/the Marketing Hub group, and a podcast myself that Kim was on recently or is going to be on. And that is called Health Coach Nation. And that's business tips for coaches.
Thank you so much, Hailey. And make sure you go follow Hailey and join me. I'm also in the Marketing Hub. And please make sure that you nourish your entire life today and give yourself grace. I really appreciate you being here. If you resonated with this podcast, it would mean a lot to me if you'd be willing to follow or subscribe to the Emotional Eats podcast. Then you'll never miss an episode. Just go to the Emotional Eats show page on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts, and tap the plus sign in the upper right-hand corner and click on it. While you're there, if you'd be willing to give me a 5-star rating and review, I would be so grateful. If you'd like to take a screenshot and share it on Instagram, just tag me at Kim Hines Health. I would love to hear your thoughts and let me know how I can support you. You can always DM me on Instagram, again, at Kim Hines Health. And just remember to nourish your life and give yourself grace today.